Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Dear listener, I hope you're well. At the point of this general release, at the beginning of April 2024, we are in the middle of two eclipses. A lunar eclipse, which was on the 25th of March here in the UK, and the forthcoming solar eclipse on the 8th of April, which is an even larger event in the US. It's set to be an interesting month on a personal level and globally. We're feeling a lot of energies from these events. These are powerful trigger points, and we will be feeling them for the rest of the year. And I dare say this year will have effects for years to come. I recommend Pam Gregory Astrologer's YouTube channel if you'd like to learn more about the astrology side of things. As a healer, I feel compelled to give you my perspective on what I see happening in the world at present, how it makes sense to me. We can view the world as a living organism, such as referred to by James Lovelock's Gaia theory. Taking that even further from a spiritual perspective, the planet has its own energy system, the same as our own bodies do. So I'm going to explain to you first how chakras function in our bodies, and then use that same system to explain what I and many others observe to be happening on a global level. I have mentioned various aspects of this viewpoint previously, and while there are different ways to understand chakras, my training is with the body mirror system of healing, and so I'll be referring to that system of 7 chakras, starting with red at the root or base of our spine. We'll start with the 3 lower chakras. Red represents, or our root chakra represents, our relationship with our mother and issues of security and whether we feel nourished in general. It represents our grounding to earth, money, home, job, those sorts of issues. It affects the skeletal system in our bodies and our elimination system because it sits in that part of our body, and it affects anything below the hips. Next is the orange chakra, and that relates to food, sex and emotions and emotional health. It sits in the area of our body which contains our sexual organs. And next is the yellow chakra, and this is found at the point of our solar plexus, just above our navel. And this relates to issues of power and control, freedom and identity, personality, ownership and ego, mental health and rationality. It's also associated with the ease with which we are able to be ourselves. And for many of us, this is something we're working through on personal levels, as we're given indications in certain societies that there is only one way to be in order to fit in. These 3 chakras are the power points that we have largely been living our lives by in this material world, in this age. Aspects of these lower chakras, when they're out of balance, can result in, for example, insecurity in the red chakra, either financial or simply feeling frightened of everything or some things, and ungrounded, a sense of a lack of nourishment. And then in the orange chakra, we might experience a lack of emotional well-being. In the yellow chakra, we might experience a sense of a lack of freedom. And these kind of imbalances, they keep us tethered to the material. We're not going to move very much further if we are not able to feel at ease with these kind of basic needs as human beings. The next chakra above those 3 chakras is the green chakra, the heart chakra. It represents the sense of we are. It represents love relationships or relationships close to your heart, relating, and whether you feel accepted, and the organs within that area, which are, of course, the heart, cardiac system, and lungs. The heart chakra also relates to our immune system and is the bridge between the lower chakras, the three red, orange, and yellow, and the upper three chakras, which are more ethereal, which are the blue, the indigo, and the violet. The blue chakra at the base of the throat is the most subtle physical element connected to expressing and communicating. It is also about our goals, reaching for what we want and need in our lives, and our intuition. The following two chakras, indigo and violet, are associated with the non-physical universe, where thought forms exist as holographic images but can be manifested into the physical. We might view them as existing in the matrix or in the ether. Indigo chakra is associated with our third eye and conscious awareness, spirit-to-spirit communication, and it is through this chakra that I believe we see, experience, and in some instances communicate with fairies and beings of other realms, because this often happens telepathically, so that's third eye. It's where you can go to connect with your own deep spiritual self through meditation also. And then at the crown of our heads, the violet chakra or crown chakra relates to cosmic consciousness. It's our connection with the all. It also relates to our capacity for empathy, our relationship with our Father in this lifetime, and with authority in general. It connects with our own inner light and relates to mystic states of consciousness and the deepest part of who we are as souls. At this level, we are all connected, all part of the universe, all one. Now, as a planetary group consciousness, over the last 2,000 years, we have been living in the Piscean age. Ages are based on the backwards journey of the Earth through the constellation signs, which takes about 2,160 years. So the Piscean age, and remember this started around the time of Jesus, and this is quite, not that this is anything to do with religion, but I find it interesting that Jesus' symbol was the fish, which of course represents the Piscean age. Now, this age is concerned with solar plexus chakra, yellow chakra energy, in other words, and we've been concerned within this last 2,000 years with building power structures, carving up land and deciding that we own certain areas and that others cannot exist there. We've decided that Indigenous people cannot exist there. We've decided that some people can rule over other people, and we've taken their resources for ourselves. We've killed and maimed in the view that the other person or people are less than us in some way. So that's the kind of viewpoint from the solar plexus energy, the Piscean, that has been ruling in the Piscean age. We have prioritized wealth and power and fame associated with identity. This is ego running riot. This is solar plexus energy. We've also held rationalism as the only way of being and making sense of the world around us. Now, remember the idea of the earth being an organism and itself moving through the chakras. So at this time, we are moving into the age of Aquarius, the green chakra, love, acceptance, the sense of we are, I am you and you are me. And from that perspective, we could not wipe people off the land because we are all one. We can imagine ourselves being that person because no one is greater than another. And so this is a humanitarian age that we're moving into, where the behaviour that we've seen that is ruled by power and control in the last 2,000 years would make sense to us in a humanitarian age. We can look around right now at what is falling away. Structures that upheld wealth and power for the few, financial systems which have been propped up for the last few decades anyway, societal systems which are on their knees right now as a result of privatisation, and notice the most ego-driven Western countries, notably the ones who were also most involved with colonialism going back hundreds of years and to this day, and their behaviours in recent years, overstretching state power, control over citizens, freedom, and notably recent moves to stop demonstrations, which I think is a very clear indication of power running riot and control running riot. In my view, this is psychotic behaviour that we're seeing from the most powerful countries, their refusal to step in and stop the genocide and manufactured famine which has taken place, and attempts to shut down non-mainstream news sources. These are all signs that we are witnessing the death throes, in my opinion, of these sorts of societies. Most citizens around the world can no longer accept that what is happening is for the good of any kind. They can feel it in their hearts that this is entirely wrong. It is, in my view, an insult to humanity to suggest otherwise. We feel it. The Aquarian age has already begun in our hearts. People have started to build lives away from the old world, prioritising care of the earth and each other. We have lost faith in our so-called leaders. People are giving their lives to aid horrific situations unfolding around the world. Many of us are called to return to living in harmony with nature and saving our environment from destruction, recognising that we are all in this together, that we are children of this earth, and that we do need to stop the pollution, and we observe the threat of removing our right to roam upon the earth and the environments that we do have. So if we switch back again to a human view, if we were observing someone experiencing such chaos as we currently see this unfolding on a global level, we might view that as a breakdown. But we can also choose to view from another perspective and see it as a breakthrough that we are heading towards. And I want to add that by saying that, I'm not ignoring or devaluing the huge loss of life that is taking place at the moment. But surely we can look at what is happening right now and say that we do not want to live like this anymore. I think we are in fact doing that as human beings right now. It is as if the world as a planet is experiencing what looks like death of the ego. Psychologically, when someone experiences an ego death via a breakdown, or what we're calling a breakthrough, it can feel to them as if they're actually dying. And I believe that what we may experience as a global consciousness in amongst this chaos, we may find that we are reaching the edge and it may feel like it is the end. But my feeling is that we place our focus on trusting the breakthrough, and in the meantime, do all we can to aid our fellow human beings globally and locally with whatever means we have, and that may be through prayer, financial assistance, action, artistic expression, speaking out in some way. We're coming together. We need to regain that sense of community and heart connection with one another. This is really important. And rather than allowing ourselves to be told what to think, feel with your heart. Feel what's right for you. You know in your own heart the way in which you should act accordingly with how you really feel about things. We need to keep the faith and we will move through this together. So it felt important for me to lay this out right now to listeners. So I hope some of that made sense, and I hope that it brings solace in some way, because I do feel like we're teetering on the edge, but I feel like rather than feeling this is kind of Armageddon and all is lost, what we're seeing is the loss of the old world that is just no longer acceptable to us. In this episode, I speak to a man in Auckland, New Zealand, who grew up in what was originally native bushland. He had had a fairy encounter inside his childhood home as an 11-year-old boy, and his response to that experience had a profound effect on how he decided to live his life from that point forward. It's a really inspiring story, and I feel it suggests what may be possible if we can look beyond our fears and lean into communication with landscape and environment and the non-human beings who reside there. It feels like an important story for now. I hope you enjoy it. The full-length version is on Patreon. Thank you so much to all my wonderful supporters there, without whom this podcast would not exist. In amongst the chaos and suffering, what I see rising is love for one another. So let us hold each other through this and know that we will reach better times. In this liminal time, I firmly believe that the unseen beings are part of this universe too and are aiding us. Remain curious. Time to Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast. My name is Jo Hickey Hall and I'm here this time with my guest, Ricky. And Ricky, you had contacted me some time ago to talk about a childhood encounter that you'd had. And you've just been reminding me that actually this is the first time you've spoken about that. So firstly, welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for coming and sharing this with me, and start wherever you like, really. But that's interesting that you were kind of prompted to contact me after listening to the London Goblins episode.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. That was a really interesting episode, and just listening to it and the experience and the description of what she encountered. Well, it really did just stop me in my tracks. I thought, my goodness, I've never talked about or written about my experience ever in my entire life. And it's always been there in my mind, and it's always kind of been at the back there. And it just took that little prompt to go, gosh, I'm not mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not unique. And I think that was the thing. I think when you realise that your experiences aren't unique, that all of a sudden actually it's a lot. I don't know. It's a lot easier to talk about. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. How old were you when this happened?
Gosh, I don't know. I might have been less than 10. Not far off, around about 10, I think, possibly. So we had a lovely place to live. My dad worked for the council, and so it was a council house, but it was actually bordered right onto a very large park. The park itself used to be an old farm, but a lot of the original trees were still there. I guess the main ones amongst them were the giant puriri trees. These things are huge. They're really big trees. They're really very old. And they're quite impressive. But the park was also next to a lake. The lake's an ancient volcanic crater. And it was kind of in Auckland, New Zealand. So the trees I think the big trees are probably not more than about 600 years old, the big ones, which is when the last eruption of the volcano just offshore happened. So it was quite a funny sort of place. The local indigenous people, the local Māori, it was very important to them. The lake itself as a food source, it's full of eels, just absolutely chocker full of eels. And the beach next door. Also, there's a grove of pohutakawa trees nearby called Te Uru Tapu. And they're quite special. The pohutakawa trees are beautiful. If you've never seen them, have a look. They're lovely, sort of silvery grey colour. They live on the coastline. But this particular grove of trees was used to place the wrapped bodies of people who passed in. And they would leave them there for a year or so to let nature take its course, and then collect the bones and then store the bones in beautifully carved boxes in lava caves around the lake. So yeah, it's an enormously long history. It's a really, really, really special place. And then post-European, it became a farm, and then it was acquired by the council, and it became a park. But the trees persisted, the big trees particularly, because they're insanely hard. They're incredibly, you just can't cut the darn things down. And I remember Dad used to collect old fence posts which had been made out of it, and he'd be cursing and swearing because they would just blunt the saws and the chisels and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's quite an old place. Our house was funny. It was an old, it was quite an old place. It was a council flat, well, a council house rather, not a flat. I suspect it was probably one of the original farmhouses there. Not entirely sure. Dad was a builder. He was actually a building inspector for the council, but so he was quite happy modifying it and adding walls and taking walls out to accommodate a growing family and then a shrinking family and all the rest of it. So it was a bit of an odd house in that regard. But yeah, it was a fantastic place for a young kid to grow up.
Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com. It sounds it, and just kind of so much happening around the edges too. And I love the idea of these trees that seem to go on and on. Like if the wood is hard to to not so malleable, but goes on and on, I can really understand why the local Indigenous people would maybe associate, leaving their beloved dead around these trees that seem to be, super trees.
Yes.
That sounds incredible. And so did they carve the boxes from that wood? Is that what they were?
No, different timber. Different timber for the carvings. It's just pre-European Māori didn't have metal tools, so some of the tougher woods were not easy to carve. But that said, some of the stone tools they did have, like the ponamu, which is a nephrite jade, is harder than steel.
Oh wow!
But the carvings, if you have a look on the museum website or somewhere, they're just beautiful carvings, extraordinary.
Amazing. What do they depict? What kinds of?
Hugely symbolic. Māori didn't have a written language, but they did have a very rich oral history and also history captured in carvings and in weaving and stuff like that. So it's not trivial surface decoration at all. Everything has a meaning and a connection, and the more you kind of come to understand the meaning behind the symbology, it's quite regional as well. Carvings in the north are very different from carvings in the south, and so you can look at, if you know what you're looking at, and I don't really, you can look at a carving, tell where it came from and what it represents and stuff like that. So yeah, that's quite important. The place, land for the Indigenous population is incredibly important, obviously for sustaining life and society and community as well, but also a deep connection to the land.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm thinking about the way that, so in a lot of the dolmens that we have now that I grew up around, like this one behind me, we know that the Indigenous communities left, when somebody would die, they would, we don't know exactly what they were doing, but they would be placing and removing the bones and doing something with them and doing some kind of rituals with them, as we do now, as in connecting with our loved ones when we passed in a meaningful way. But to have the bones, there's something about that. And I've always thought that would be a really precious thing to be able to have access to. So when the bones were buried there, would they go every so often and perform any kind of rituals there, or would they just literally, perhaps that happens later? Because like with these,
No, I'm not really familiar with the cultural side of it.
I must find out. I'll it'd be great if you could send me the links for the museum. I'd love to take a look at that.
Yeah, I'll do that for sure.
Yeah. So you grew up in this place where, you were living in nature. It's not like it was on your doorstep. You were plonked right in the middle of it and in the midst of it. And so how was that? How did this kind of encounter come about in terms of your relationship with the landscape?
It's kind of funny. So for a very long time as a young child, I was a real scaredy cat.
Scared?
Scared, terrified of
right.
Scaredy cat, sorry, yeah. Terrified of the dark. I was a kid that had to sleep with the light on, the door open, the covers pulled up over my nose, to the point where I was actually almost scared to go to bed. I was scared of the dreams, I don't know if that was an influence of the surroundings or if it was me or whatever, but anyway. And that's kind of what built up to the encounter, which made it quite dramatic for me. So I'd quite often get, you wake up as a kid, you've had a nightmare, you go and hide in mum and dad's bed and, look for a bit of comfort there. So one night I don't know what had driven me out of bed, climbed into bed with mum and dad, they immediately rolled over, went back to sleep. But what it's like when you wake up from something like that. You just eyes like saucers and acutely aware of what's going on around you. And so I was laying in bed on my side looking towards the door. As I said, Dad was a builder and he was a bit of an odd character. So the door, I don't know where he got it from. It must have been an old office door or something like that, because about 2/3 of the way up it had a clear glass pane. Not something I've put in my bedroom door, but I'm sure he got it for free or cheap somehow. So, so I was just kind of looking at the door just because it was, in my line of sight. And that was when, the figure appeared, like head and shoulders, maybe 12 inches, about 30 centimeters tall, or 30 centimeters head and shoulders is what I could see of it. So I guess if we extrapolated normal proportions, overall it might have been, I don't know, maybe a meter at the most, tall. And it was quite grotesque features almost, slightly, not looking like a person or quite distorted almost. And the head came straight up. And at the time I thought it was odd because it was a small head, obviously a small creature. So how did it get, 3 or 4 feet off the ground? I'm not sure. Still no idea. But anyway, the head popped up and it turned and it looked into the room through the glass and it looked at me. It could see me. And I could see it. and there was recognition there, and it was malevolent. It was not nice. It was, I don't know if you've seen something and you've been scared of it, but it's not that fright scare. It's that, oh, this is not good. This is not good. And it was quite terrifying. Yeah. And I kind of got the feeling I really felt like it was looking for me. Almost as if it had been around, it had been looking for me and then found me and then it saw me and it couldn't get to me. Boy, it was terrifying. Yeah.
I'm feeling it as you're telling it, and that sense of dread, and the way that you say its head just popped up, and then you're thinking, oh my God, what was it? How did it get up there? Was it levitating to get up there? Which is even, and my imagination's running away with me now because I feel like I'm right there with you, and I can imagine how terrifying that is, and that sort of thud, that place where your heart is thudding because it's like a dread feeling of
I've
terror.
got the shakes now.
Yeah, I can only imagine how you would feel as a little kid as well. And so you think so you were below the age of 10, and do you know sort of because you mentioned you've been having dreams around that time. So was this something, do you think you'd been doing this a lot to sort of go into your parents? And if so, can you remember what the dreams entailed?
I can't remember any of the dreams, honestly. I just remember, I absolutely remember getting into bed, scared of what is going to, what's going to happen. Whether it was, I was every night terrified. To the point where you establish little rituals, like in your head, and it sings. And I was an odd child. I go to bed with a cup of tea.
Well, it's a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism, isn't it? Whatever works. So sorry. Did you say that you made a cup of tea? Is that?
Oh yeah, I'd often go to bed with it. You got your comic book and a cup of tea, and I'd read for a little bit. And weird things like if it rained, I knew there wouldn't be any dreams.
That's interesting.
Stuff like that. It was and I don't know if that was me creating a something in my head that said that no, this has happened, so dreams aren't going to happen, or whether it was a real association. I'm or a coping mechanism. I'm not entirely certain, but yeah, it was. So yes, I was probably quite a frequent visitor to mum and dad at night. But yeah, so every night my bedroom door had to be open with the hall light on, so there was light coming into the room, curtains drawn and hiding under the blankets, all that kind of stuff. I used to be quite convinced that at night my toys would move. Yeah. They'd be in a different place in the morning. Mum always said I was nuts, but no, I don't know, maybe.
It's so hard for anyone else to understand, though, isn't it? Because, and the thing is, your parents don't want to, at least to you, take that seriously.
No.
I mean, I would now, obviously, with my child, because I know, but most people, their main concern there would be to calm their child so that they can go to sleep without feeling frightened. And that's what we're kind of told to do. Oh, don't worry, darling, it's just nonsense. Oh, it's just a dream. Oh, don't be silly if that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then, that on the one hand is being, it's out of kindness, it's out of love. But it kind of leaves you with, well, what can I trust? The part of me that knows there's something not right here, or the kind of external source of love and authority that tells me that I'm wrong, from a really good place. But it sets up a very confusing set of experiences for the child that is experiencing something but is told that that's not how it is. Do you remember, I guess the fact that you were reading a comic kind of narrows it down in terms of age-wise, that you would maybe have been slightly older than perhaps younger age of sort of 4, 5, 6, maybe more
Oh yeah,
7,
yeah,
8,
yeah,
9. So
yeah,
do you think
yeah,
more 7,
absolutely.
8, 9?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what kind of comics were you reading?
Oh, Commando comics, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, Commando and Battle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I wonder,
Yeah.
did you
Sorry.
ever use, sorry, I was just wondering if you ever used any of the tactics or skills or techniques that you might have learnt in those comics. Do you ever remember kind of, I'm not sure that the commando would sort of necessarily depend on his cup of tea or, I mean, the rain is an interesting one because that kind of suggests, and I don't know what you think about this, but it kind of suggests that, well, I guess maybe not, that it was coming from outside the house into the house? Or do you think it was in the house and something would trigger it in the house?
No,
What
I
was your
think it
feeling?
came from outside.
Came from
I don't
outside.
think it was in the house. The house was nice. It was lovely.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird with the way that Dad had modified all the bits and pieces,
Yeah.
walls and things like that. And he built a workshop underneath it. And I was quite happy with the house, but it was certainly outside. The bush was, sorry, we call it forest bush
Yeah.
in New Zealand. The bush was really interesting. I had one experience um, I only really had one kind of odd experience in the bush, and that was when I was in the Boy Scouts, the local scout halls not far away. And then one evening, I think they sent us all out to go and play hide and seek or something. I think they just really just wanted to get the kids out and have a cup of tea and a chat. So we all took off out into the dusk, running around in the bush. And I was with my friend who was just in front of me, and someone walked right past me. And I said, "Gotcha." And my friend turned around and said, "Who?" And there was no one there. And it was a reflex. It was a reflex. So I didn't fully register what I'd seen. And it wasn't until my friend had turned around and said what was there. And I thought all I'd seen was a grey outline of a grey shadow of a person. But just absolutely, it was a person. It was just, they were right there in front of me. It was just right on dusk. I think any brighter I wouldn't have seen it, any darker I wouldn't have seen it. It was just on that right point. And I knew every inch of the bush. I knew everywhere, and it kind of came out from the side of the track, across the track in front of me, and disappeared. It's just so fast. Yeah.
Would it have been, what kind of size or height would that figure have been?
Oh, adult size, I think. Yeah, it was taller than me.
Yeah. And when you say track, is that
Oh,
like a walking track or?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So the bush was because it's quite close to an urban area. The bush was full of little paths and tracks all the way through it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's close to the lake as well then.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was probably only 100 meters from the lake.
Really?
So it's
Okay.
right, yeah, right on the water's edge. I mean, as kids, we used to play in the water and next to it, and yeah.
How was that? I mean, it seems to be that often the kind of more frightening experiences, well, you can look at the London goblins, as an
Yeah.
example. And even, I don't know if you've heard the episode of the Green Goblin climbing through the little boy's window. Um,
No, I
yeah, I
haven't
mean,
heard
it
of
might not be one you want to listen to, but actually, it's a really lovely story. And this little green skinned figure was very welcome in that child's life, as it happens. But yeah, but also that was where his house kind of at the back, it went on to a forest, quite a large forest area, I think, with a creek and a train track. So there was water in that area, and actually that figure disappeared into a drainage ditch. So again, connecting him with the water. So do you feel then that figure could potentially have come from the water? When you think about that, do you have a sense of whether it may have came from the bush, just within your own body, if you like, whether it came from the bush or from the water?
No, I think it came from the bush.
Right.
I don't think it came from the water. The lake is incredibly old. Someone will correct me, but I think it's erupted about 50,000 years ago. It's fed, there's no streams coming into it. It's entirely from springs and runoff.
Yeah.
So it's it's deep, very, very deep. I would never go there. I used to swim in it, but only in certain little bits because it was really scary.
With the eels as well, that's going to be fun.
The eels, yeah, and the eels were, we used to try and catch the eels, but not my favorite to eat.
Did you tell your parents about? No.
I mean, it's I don't know why I didn't tell them. I don't know why. It was it was a quite, I guess I was too scared. I think in the I guess the fear is in the retelling it. You give it substance, and you're inviting it back. And there's no way on this planet I wanted to see it again. And then that kind of leads on to the weird thing that happened afterwards. And that was probably the bit for me that I never really, not that I understood what I saw, but the other bit I never really understood was not long after that, one evening, I think I was watching a television program or something, and it was someone wandering around I think it might have been Country Calendar, which is one of the rural programs here. Someone was wandering around a paddock in the dark, and I suddenly realised I'm not afraid of the dark. Like, it wasn't a gradual thing. It was, I'm not afraid of the dark at all. And I went to bed that night, and I remember, because it was quite a weird feeling. It was almost like a joy. I closed the bedroom door, drew back the curtains and opened the window, and slept like that ever since.
Wonderful.
It was overnight. And the progression from that was the park, which in the dark was quite scary. Even now, if you look at it, you go, I'm not wandering there in the dark. I loved it. I used to go down and wander around in the dark. I used to get quite excited. I'd take a torch. I never used the torch. I'd walk down to the lake, and I'd just use a torch to try and spot the eels, see if you can see the biggest one in the water, because they come right up to the banks at night, and then turn the torch off and wander back home. Even got to the point where I used to kind of dare myself to go into the spookiest, darkest corners of the park and wander in. But it was just, it was so comfortable. And the bizarre thing is, I've always kind of thought, I've just seen what's out there, and yet now it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I guess that's why it's kind of always, I never really talked about it or but constantly thought about it. I mean, how did that transformation happen? Because it was a transformation. It was overnight, and it literally gone from hiding under the covers to lying in bed, looking out a window, through an open window at the moon. Gosh, I don't know. It's weird.
I love that. I mean, it can literally happen like that, though. You know, we can make a decision in our lives at a
Yeah,
really deep part of ourselves, and because we kind of recognize. So I don't know, there is something within all of us, and that is possible, where you can just, you know,
yeah,
decide from now, actually, no. And it can be even, and I'm not saying it was this, but it can be a kind of sense of defiance against whatever that fear was as well. For some
yeah.
people, then they make a decision at a really deep place, and then it takes some time for that to play out. Like, for
Mm,
instance, if they have a fear of water and they say, right, this is enough of the fear of water, I'm going to crack this. And then they make that decision and they take small steps towards it. So they will go a little bit deeper every time or whatever. They
mm,
give themselves, you know, as you were saying, sort of going to the spookier places, give themselves a little bit of a push, a little bit of a push. But at the same time, you can, you know, click your fingers. And if you've made that really strong intention from that moment, no, this is it. I'm not going to be frightened anymore. You have
mm,
the absolute power within you to do that. And we're not always told that, really. Um,
mm.
but it's a very useful one. And I think if that's kind of risen up naturally within you, I love that. I love the fact that you just decided at that moment, and the fact that you're then going out into the bush and you're
Testing it.
experiencing. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. It was really testing
Mm,
myself and testing, I guess, testing the new the new confidence. But I like the word defiance.
hmm
You know, it's almost like, yes, I've seen you. I know you're there. You don't scare me. You're scary, but you're not scaring me. Um, yeah. And ever since then, I've always felt utterly comfortable in the bush, in the dark. And later on in life, um, I joined the Army Reserve, and it was only it was only then I realised actually that not everybody is comfortable in the dark in the forest. Being able to sit, but for me, being able to sit, you can just sit anywhere in the bush. You can sit quietly and just listen, and absolutely safe. Just that feeling of you're part of it, and you know what's going on around you, and you're absolutely safe. Um, it's great. So it's a wonderful feeling.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there that, you know, it's part of you. You are, or think you said you are part of it. When you
Mm,
enter these spaces and you enter them in recognition of that,
mm,
that you are part of it and it's kind of part of you, then there's no need for the fear, because
no,
the kind of like the division, and you can apply it to lots of different situations, can't you? That we see where, you know, the division creates, or the fear creates division.
yeah,
And when we're kids in our society, in our sort of modern Western society, we are told that, you know, there's dangers out there. It's very other.
mm,
Nature itself is very other. Whereas if you look at the actual place that you grew up in and the indigenous communities there, it was not like that for them.
no,
It was, you know, birth, death, everything took place in
yeah,
and around nature and in honor of nature, and they were part of that. So, you know, perhaps there was something in growing up in that really sacred environment. I was very lucky to grow up around that. Maybe there was something of that kind of that aided that the sense of that.
yeah. It was, yes, yeah, very strong. Yeah, the the bush was so old that had an ed, had a feeling of itself. You didn't go into a park with a whole bunch of trees. It was a collective. It's funny, hey, you often hear people say, "Oh, I went for a walk alone in the forest," and da, da, da. You're not alone. Everything knows you're there. The trees know you're there. Birds, animals, insects, even the mycelium under your feet know that you're there, and everything's watching you, wondering what are you doing. you know, and it takes a long time to settle into that environment and for the environment to get used to you. And it's funny, you know, I mean, people sometimes, oh, you know, we went fairy hunting, but we didn't see anything. And then, well, what do you expect? You go, imagine sitting in your living room, having a cup of tea, watching the telly, and someone comes barging into your house looking for you. Hello, what are you going to do? You're going to hide. But, you know, if they knock politely at the front door, introduce themselves, and oh, look, they've got cake. It's a much different scenario. But yeah, accepting that you're a part of it and that it is a whole. It's not just an isolated tree, but it's actually a part of a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love this sense also of the way that you knew this place so well and it knew you so well. And I'm just wondering whether, you know, as a child, when you're playing there with your friends and family and what have you, did you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, just one brother was living with us at the time. The others had kind of grown up and moved out. And he was there for a while, but then he moved out, yeah.
Right, yeah. And when you said there was this kind of like sense of familiarity with that being, do you think you might have known it from the bush potentially? Do you think that perhaps is there a potential element of recognition from when you were playing?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That feel right to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah. Because yeah, definitely when it looked at me, it knew me. So yeah, it's it's an interesting idea. But scary. But yeah.
But it kind of puts you back in that that experience as the little boy, but actually, you know, maybe there's this possibility where it just wanted to know, you know, to know you. And if there's something, I mean, you know, not everybody can, or not everybody does do what you did, where they, you know, face their fears. They go out there, you know, in this defiance and say, right, I'm not going to be frightened anymore. And not only that, but I'm gonna make this environment, you know, part of my life and get to know it very intimately as you did, and all those places that people might go, oh, well, okay, I'll go for a walk maybe in the day, or okay, I might go for a walk in the night, but I'm definitely not going to go to that place. And you're heading straight to those pockets. You're becoming very intimate with this place. And I, you know, being in the forest myself at night, I know what that's like, where, and I've talked about this before, where we used to go for rituals, and in preparation for the ritual, we would go into the dark parts of the forest alone, you know, break up individually, and we would be, what I felt, something coming out of the darkness right up to your face, almost as if they were sort of checking you out and having a look at you. That's how it felt to me. Something in the darkness. It was part of the forest itself. It was an aspect of the forest, whether that was a being or just the character of the forest at night, I don't know. But we all experience that. And so when you're doing that, you know, not everybody responds that way to an environment. And I'm just wondering whether this being maybe saw something in you that it could communicate with, maybe that you were open. Do you feel like it was malevolent?
Yeah, but not evil. If you know what I mean, there's a wantonness about some things. But and I guess yes, it wasn't nice, but did it mean harm? I don't know. Just because something's not nice and it might be malevolent, it might be, you know, scary, doesn't necessarily mean it means harm. And and maybe that's the connection to the revelation later, that or shortly after that, actually the forest is all right. I like it there. Yeah. There's only one other. I've only ever had one occasion in the bush where I felt uncomfortable, and that was one night. It was an army. It was an army training exercise. I was reasonably senior, so and I was working that day and working that evening. So I said, I know where you guys are going to be. It was in a plantation forest just north of Auckland here. I knew where they were going to be. So I said, look, I'll come up later on and I'll walk out and I'll meet you. So I parked the car about midnight after work, put my pack on, went for a walk. Beautiful evening, like bright moonlit, bright moonlit evening. Walking, really comfortable walk. Lovely. It was just a lovely evening to be out walking. It was really nice. And I was crossing, you walk down the track, then cut through the bush, cut through the trees, these plantation pines. And then there was a large area that had been felled. And it was just and it was really desolate. After coming out of the trees into this wide open space, trees have been cut. There's still a lot of rubbish on the ground, still a lot of branches and stuff on the ground, kind of making my way through that. But it was wide open, bright moonlight, heading down towards, it was about 2 or 3 kilometres and only another kilometre or so to go to meet up with the rest of the group. And as I was coming down the hill towards the tree line, it just kind of stopped me. It was so desolate. The place, it was desolate, is the only real word for it. But in the tree line, looking at that, and I've never been uneasy around going under the shadow of the trees in the dark. But boy, that night it did. I couldn't, I looked down at the tree line and no, I actually turned around. I was only a kilometre to go to where I was supposed to be. I turned around and I went back and I went home. Because no one was planning I was going to cross that tree line. It was a line, and it really said, no, don't cross. And it was kind of weird. Got in a bit of trouble because I didn't turn up, but it was worth it. There's no way. Yeah. That's probably the only time I ever felt uncomfortable in the dark and in the forest. But it wasn't my place either. No. It was not. I was new there, and so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can move through that. Sometimes it can just be like that, where you meet a new landscape to begin with. It can feel a bit unwelcoming. And then sometimes you can kind of push through that the more you familiarize, as you were saying, sort of turning up in a place and expecting to be able to feel welcome. Sometimes it takes some time to actually sort of build that up. But the other thing to say is that, trusting your intuition, maybe there was something there aside from the idea that, of course, with this destruction and desolation of this place, something about, that being in the landscape, maybe it was making it a dangerous place to be. Maybe that conjures up some other kind of energies that are not good to be around, or brings forth something that you do not want to face by yourself at that time of day. Because that time of day, you're sort of going into nighttime, and that's a very potent time. So maybe there's, listening to that intuition, you could have escaped something. Could have even been a warning from the forest itself. You're never going to know, but I think it's right to trust it and act on it.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, it was really it was a really powerful urge. I think, definitely. I didn't belong there.
Yeah,
and I wasn't welcome there. maybe if I had more time to connect with the place. I think environments need to get used to you as much as you need to get used to them. And it's, we know that the environment around us is acutely aware of our presence, and we're often oblivious to that awareness. But it is. But when you connect with that, and you become a part of it, it's a great comfort. So when you go somewhere new and you don't have that, it's like being in a strange town and you don't know what are the rules here, what's going on. This looks scary. That's not good. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I wonder if you'd ever talk to any of the Indigenous community, the elders in the community at any time. Did you ever have access to be able to, I don't know if you ever went to school with anybody that was able to tell you about the history of the area, or was it
No,
ever discussed?
no,
No.
no. Yeah, unfortunately, through the colonisation process, a lot of the Indigenous people being displaced and land was taken, and there's a lot of hurt in the land around that. But the connection is still there, and the Māori have a great tradition of spiritual beings in the landscape. The main one is that everyone kind of thinks of as the taniwha, and taniwhas are often associated with water. They're often a guardian spirit. Sometimes they're almost, they have personalities of their own and things like that. They're a part of the landscape, but they are the landscape, but they're also their own beings. They're quite remarkable, and I'm sure the late taniwha, absolutely sure of it. And you have to respect that. If you And I think, if you don't, and many Māori will say, if you don't mess with the taniwha, or it's not going to end well. But there's a lot of Māori traditions around spiritual beings. They have the Patupaia Rehi, which is the Māori fairies.
Yes.
A lot of stories about those. Typically, they're described as tall and fair with red hair, which is really completely at odds to Polynesian people living in mountains and the mist and all the rest of it, but not so much in the lowlands, coming down towards the low. So, yeah, it's a landscape populated by more than just people, and there's ancestors and there are spiritual beings, and there's so yeah, it's a very complex and very rich place to be.
It sounds it. I would love to visit sometime. I have some friends that lived there for a while. Do you remember what the being looked like? So if it's okay for you to describe it, because kind of putting you back in that, I don't want to to go anywhere that's uncomfortable. So you don't need to.
No, that's okay. The features were good. Yeah, it's hard to kind of recall. I remember seeing it very vividly. The features were quite grotesque. Don't remember, the mouth was kind of small, the nose was a bit large, the eyes were large. I don't remember any hair as such, or even clothing really. Only saw like the top bit briefly. But yes, it wasn't your classical goblin. It looked more like a small old person, but distorted almost.
So the skin color,
Pale.
right? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Eyes were dark. that might have been the light. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. I'm thinking about the rain. So yeah, perhaps there's something about that. Maybe, well, who knows? It seemed to you anyway at that point for some reason that if it rained,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
was going to be all right.
you were going to be all right. So there's something in that, isn't there? There is
Yeah.
something in that. Did you obviously never mentioned it to your brother?
No,
So did he ever have any trouble sleeping or anything? I'm guessing he is a bit older than you then.
no, he was probably 8 years older than me. So
Right.
around about that time, he was out looking for parties and
Yeah.
trying to get into the pub underage.
And the other thing I wondered was around the time that this happened, and then later around the time that you decided that you were not going to be frightened anymore. First of all, what was the period of time do you estimate between the two? Are we talking kind of months or a year or
Oh no, there
weeks?
would have been weeks or a month.
Weeks or a
Weeks
month?
or months.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was not
weeks or
long at all.
months. Yeah,
Yeah, very very quick.
that's great. It's kind of like it feels like a gift somehow, even though, because I mean, these experiences, people think of fairies and they think, oh, it's, people that haven't talked to people like you and I who've had these encounters or never had an actual real encounter. But from the outside, people will assume that it's, waving of wands and maybe, making wishes come true and things like that. So maybe there's kind of like a kernel of truth to these tales, is that there was a
Mm,
gift here. There was a gift
mm,
here, and it wasn't packaged in a kind of fairy tale packaging where
no,
something skips along. But nevertheless, and nature never really works like that anyway, does it?
no,
It's there's kind of a process, and the fact that you then possibly as a result of that decided not to be frightened anymore and stepped through that threshold of fear,
mm,
you then found yourself in this kind of limitless place where
yes,
you could actually commune and relate and feel the environment around you, and that kind of that two-way communication. And not many people get to realize that in their
mm.
lifetime. So to kind of get there as a little boy is, I feel, a real gift.
Oh, it
Um,
felt it. I mean, it felt. I mean, it was really joyful. It was. It was a yeah. Not being afraid. It was a revelation, and it was a joy and a freedom. Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
It was quite
You're
cool.
you're free from the fear.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a big,
Which was one.
it's a huge thing.
Yeah. It was very big.
Do you feel like you've carried that through your life with you, that freedom from fear?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even where I live at the moment, we live right in the middle of the bush. There's the Waitakere Ranges, which are next to Auckland. We're up in the ranges, and our little piece of land, which is only about half an acre, but we've got enormous trees. Like, where we are has been here. Was subdivided in 1929, I think it was, and our little corner of the section, because it actually sat on a swamp, was never felled. So the trees here are as they have always been. And we actually had a botanist come out one afternoon, and she had a happy afternoon wandering around photographing trees and recording things and stuff. So yeah, but it's lovely.
Fantastic.
It's really nice.
That sounds wonderful. It's reminding me, I don't know if you've heard the episode, A Tree Teacher and Two Sons, which is this woman who was in New Zealand. And actually, it might be nice to put you in touch with one another, because she grew up really loving trees after she had an experience as a child. And she now does everything she can to protect trees in any which way
Oh,
she can,
lovely.
and has a piece of land. So it'd be nice to get you both in touch.
Mm.
I'm thinking about what happened afterwards when you had this revelation and you felt changed as a person. Did that then have some shifts for you in your life, at school with friends and all of that? Was there a shift that took place for you at school?
Probably isolating at school. You as a young boy, you go to school. It's all about sport, parties and all the rest of it, and I just didn't register with that. So yeah, it wasn't terribly beneficial in that regards towards my social life. That's for sure.
But it certainly
But
put you on your path.
oh yeah, and I wouldn't change anything.
Do you do something now that kind of encompasses this relationship you have with nature? I'm just wondering.
Um, apart from the usual getting out in the bush and tramping and doing all that kind of stuff, I love to work with wood. I do a lot of work with wood, carving. Wood and carve wood and stone and stuff. But yeah, so the connection is still there. Yeah.
And have you passed that on to anybody else in your
No, I don't
family?
think so. None of my kids are. Oh, possibly. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. They might. They might. Oh, and running. I mean, I run a lot with the dogs. I had 2 dogs, and there's a fungus going through the forest here at the moment, so they've closed off most of the tracks. But before they close the tracks, every morning I used to take the dogs for a run. And in the winter, it inevitably was dark. You're on the track at 5:45 and running with them. And I knew the path so well, I never ran with a torch. And it's quite fun to actually try and try running on a bush track in the dark with your eyes closed and listen for the sound of your feet on the track to tell you where you are.
Ooh, amazing. Wow. You've
That's
gone
kind
up.
of fun.
That's kind of like several levels beyond now that you've gone then basically of just
Oh, it's kind of neat.
yeah, that's almost what you might experience in dreams. That's kind of like,
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
yeah, it's like it
yeah,
kind of feels beyond the material in some ways, doesn't it? Because it's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna regard the material. I'm just gonna be, in this moment.
yeah.
Yeah, wow,
It's,
that's inspiring.
it's fun.
So great.
Just try
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks again. I'm really blown away by your story actually, and also feel extremely honored that you've told, that you've told it to me, and are allowing this to be shared with other people too. That's massive. And I feel very humbled that you trust
Oh, thank you.
this enough to do that, because I know that it's very precious.
And thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I really appreciate it.